Today is right up my street. It's all about history. Now, just need to get this tunic on.
Don't tell them they're actually quite gross and disgusting. Yeah. In fact, they're not as clean as us, you see. The next person to be the king of the whole of England is going to be... Shivering your head! 3, 2, 1,
Adam Hatfield is the founder and driving force behind Primary History Workshops, an organisation that delivers hands-on workshops to primary school classes across the country. He invited me along to one of his bookings, where the theme was the Anglo-Saxons. As with all his workshops, the day began with a story told by Adam himself.
Now, let me tell you a story. A story from a time long, long ago. A time before any of you were born. Before your parents, your grandparents, and even your grandparents' grandparents were born. There, deep down in the cave, the joy reached the ear of a creature. Lying in the dirt, lying in the darkness, the creature flashed open its disgusting yellow eyes. Woken from its slumber, it was outraged.
The purpose of the story is to set the scene, engage the children, and establish the concept of exploring the past before classes break off into separate groups for these specific activities, which range from handling weapons and armour to decoding runes.
Hello, you okay? Yeah. These are the Britons. Guess where they live? In Britain. Well done, in Britain, yes. Thing is, these Britons are loving their life. Britons and little tribes are spread all over Britain. Now, the thing is, they love their life. Look how happy they are. Look at their big thumbs up in the air. Yeah, good times.
With the day being so energised and the schedule fully packed, I decided to pay a separate visit to Adam's place during one of the well-earned school holidays to ask him where his love for history first began.
So I started in reenactment, so being a medieval soldier, and we went in that direction. So the house has always had things like pole arms and bags of swords and stuff like that from just hobby side of things. And I used to do armed combat for quite a few years, which was great fun, kept me active, but is the result of a few injuries that I have now, so I don't do it anymore.
Did you lose some of those combats then?
Most of them, I would say. But now, because I deliver in schools using the same kind of equipment, it means that I have a lot of things around. So everything that I do have in here, I base, if I haven't made it myself, I get someone else to make it now off archaeological finds. Right. So literally everything I think that I can see in here is based off an original in a museum, or roughly based off things like pictures that have been found. So I was a teacher for many, many years, primary school, happiest working with 7 to 11 year olds.
Right.
So when I decided that I didn't want to teach anymore, paperwork, marking,
right.
It's the same story with a lot of teachers. I decided that I needed to still work in that sector, but doing something that I was in control of.
Right.
So I put my two loves together: the fact that I love working with children, and the fact that I love history and recreating parts of it, and talking about it as well. So I started doing some bits in the school that I was working as a teacher, and it sort of sparked an interest where I was like, I wonder if I could do this full time.
Right.
7, 8 years later, ta-da, here we are, and that's what I do. And it's been an interesting journey, but my general day job now is turn up at a school, all pre-arranged, turn up at a school with the idea that we'll teach a particular topic, and so I cover Stone Age, Romans, ancient Egyptian, Anglo-Saxons, Viking, medieval, Tudor, and World War Two at the moment.
So the sort of the cool sort of eras where you can bring those to life, because they're workshops essentially.
Absolutely, and in those workshops, those are all things that are generally taught in like most mainstream Key Stage 2 primary schools.
So it lines up with the curriculum.
Curriculum as well. It means that I can come in and do a lot of the tricky stuff for the teachers. So not every teacher has a bunch of Viking helmets lying around or can talk in depth about the Battle of Hastings or recreate the Battle of Bosworth in the hall with 30 children. So by doing that, we can sort of bring it to life. And I think certainly someone that's active like myself, and a lot of the children that I see would struggle more so with the academic sides of life. It's perfect for like hooking them, bringing them in and actually going from there. One of the comments I had the other day from a child, and really liked it, was, I never really liked history, but I think I do now.
Oh wow!
Yes,
wow.
That's what
you're aiming for.
Yeah, that's what makes it for me.
Yeah.
We don't go in and write about it. We don't go and read about it. I'll tell stories. We handle items. We get dressed up. We'll recreate battles. We'll work out and decode like runic inscriptions on helmets or stones, and we make sure that a day is filled with as many fun, educational and engaging activities from there. So teachers don't have to do anything other than sort of turn up with the kids and we cover the rest.
And you're there, So history obviously to you is exciting.
Yeah.
Was that always the case? I mean, was that a passion from when you were very young?
Certainly at primary school. Usborne books for me.
Yeah, I remember those.
The pictures with half a castle and you could look at each of the things.
It was like almost like a comic book thing where they were in like, pictures.
And they time travel omnibus. That was the one I had from there. That one I remember, and I remember lots of sort of non-fiction. Very like looking at the pictures and getting very excited by it. I did read, but I didn't have the attention span to read a novel about it as a primary school child. But I could happily flick through a book and go, "Oh, that's cool," and I'd draw pictures and I'd make things and go from there. Secondary school, not interested at all, because it turned from being practical to sitting down and listening and reading the book and then going from there, and that didn't appeal to me in any subject from there.
That wasn't a history thing, that was just you were struggling with that form of kind of...
Absolutely, and I did it, and I did what I was meant to do, but it wasn't my thing. But then it was when I actually met my partner, which is 20 years ago now. I'd always liked the sort of practical sides of history, but never got into it. Yeah. And when I met my partner, it was my father-in-law met, her stepdad, and I walked onto his land, and round the corner came a 15th century medieval knight. And yeah, it was quite a surprise. I wasn't expecting it. He was having an armour fitting when we turned up. So I walked up as the new boyfriend and went, "Hello, my name's Adam. Nice to meet you." And shook hands with the knight. And from there, sat down in the living room, had a cup of tea, reached down and pulled out a dagger, and was like, "Okay, this is cool."
Was this in a castle or somewhere that he was?
This was just his house, and it was from there that I realised that my partner had grown up doing medieval reenactment and that kind of side of things, and actually I was hooked from that day.
So how old are you at that?
Ooh, I would have been in my 20s, so mid-20s.
So that was sort of nearly 20 years on from that point where you'd sort of had that initial kind of love of it.
Absolutely.
And visually that kind of brought it back.
It was what I needed, and that's why in schools I do things the way I do, because it's the practical side of history that can be far more interesting. And I think, yes, academia is important, and being able to read and being able to study academic documents, and there's different jobs in history that need to do. You need the practical blacksmiths that will make recreations. You need the archaeologists that are out there digging up and researching and dating items. You need the people that are thinking about the migration of different people throughout history. But I do think you also need the people in there that are hopefully, well, I'm going to say, delivering it in an engaging way that will hook people at an early age, and hopefully some of those people that I've hooked will go off and visit castles and get into that kind of history that I love myself as well. So,
Despite his early love of history, Adam didn't have a clear idea of what he wanted to do for a career during secondary school. Put off by the academic structure of A-levels, he embarked upon a performing arts course, excelling at the dramatic side until the inevitability of coursework reared up.
but yeah, my friend that I'd known since I was 3, who's very similar to me in many ways, turned around and said, "Hey, come with me." And I was like, "Yeah, go on then, I've got nothing better to do." So I had to go for an interview there just to make sure I was the right person. And I talked in depth about, you know, how it was going to be my passion and all this kind of stuff. It turns out that I was good at interviews. And I got in straight away with no singing, no dancing or no acting experience whatsoever. It turns out I can't sing and I definitely can't dance. I enjoyed the acting side of things, but I could never take it seriously. Also turned out there was quite a lot of coursework to do with that as well. So after a year and a half, when it was time to hand in the coursework, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to leave this one as well. So again, another failed sort of academic path in that way for myself. At which point I got a job in sales. It turns out I was pretty good at it. Then that sort of progressed into sort of management. I was managing camera shops, got into photography, liked the theory, not very good at the practical.
So your confidence must have been fairly good to be able to just. I mean, initially you went to that interview having never done, and you absolutely, that was fine. And then when you decided you were leaving that behind, you went into retail and sales.
Yeah, I think certainly at that age, at sort of like late teens, early 20s, the world was my oyster, and I was like, nah, I'll just roll into the next thing. I think with people, I was always very, very confident, but behind closed doors, lots of imposter syndrome, lots of this, that, and the other. But I could put on
you could manage that.
I could put on the happy in-person mask of going down and smashing every door down. But then I'd get home and not be so good internally, which is, you know, quite similar with a lot of people.
Adam swapped the sales job for a training role in IT before deciding to take some time out travelling, where he was able to gain some invaluable teaching experience.
Went to South Africa, spent a year and a bit around there, ended up volunteering in a primary school. So we're getting there somewhere now to where I am. Ended up volunteering in a primary school for a long time until my money ran out. You can only live on bagels and marmalade for so long. And came back to the UK, started working as an untrained teaching assistant, enjoyed it, did qualifications, did as many MVQs and on-the-job learning things to get myself all the A-level equivalents to get to university, where I then became a teacher, and I was very focused on, at that point, teaching children is what I want to do.
I was going to say, because I suppose, yes, you would have had to have gone back a little bit, but if the passion was there, then
that's it. But it all sort of falls in line. And when I look back to each part of what I went through, and it was a chaotic ride of me doing lots of random jobs and quitting and walking out, which we spoke about it previously, but I have ADHD, and it's a trait that happens with a lot of people with ADHD, that sort of impulsivity to just go, nope, I'll stop and do something else. But I genuinely feel like I've found the thing.
But you
This is
didn't
the
know
longest
you
I've
had
done it.
ADHD at the time.
Oh no, not at all, not at all.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. Well, it wasn't a thing. It didn't exist in adults.
Yeah.
I mean, it did. It
Yeah.
was. It just the medical research
wasn't
there.
recognised in that
Wasn't
way.
recognised. Back when I was at school, it was pretty much only young boys that got it, because it wasn't recognising girls either. It was only through the last sort of 20 years, I would say, that the research into ADHD and was a sort of like neurodivergence has come a long step in the right direction. It's still got a long way to go, but it is about understanding myself more than anything, that actually if I would have known that as a child, I would have felt more confident in those decisions that I would have made throughout. So one of the things that I want to do is make children that I can clearly see that I work with that I'm thinking, you're like me. I want to make them have those options and make them feel comfortable that, you know what, it's okay not to have the concentration to sit down and read a book that you're interested in. Or it's okay, there's another path, there's things that you can do, you don't have to do that part. And that's what makes a lot to me, which is why I love teaching and working with children so much, because I could break down those barriers. But it turns out I wasn't very good at paperwork at teaching.
Right.
You know, strange. I had that forever. So after quite a few years of teaching and managing it and getting through it, that's when I decided one day I need something new. And that's when I started doing this. It was merging a hobby and my job together, and I just took a dive in and it worked. It wasn't an easy ride, and there's been an awful lot of blood, sweat and tears to put the company together and, you know, get to where we are now. But it's really good. I really enjoyed it. So one of the first places that I started doing a lot of historical reenactment was a place called Harvington Hall in Kidderminster. And it's a great Tudor house. It's got priest halls. It's just a wonderful place to be. But what worked for me is I got to sit in the front lawn, set up archery targets and shoot bows and arrows. I met some really good people there. I was inspired by a particular man, Alan, who unfortunately isn't with us today, but he taught me how to shoot a bow, and he sort of guided me along the right path for understanding archery and arrows throughout history. So not only from there have I learnt how to make bows, so I've got a few bows up here. This is a 15th century, based on a 15th century Tudor longbow. Made out of a nice piece of yew. It's got a natural laminate where you've got the soft springy wood and then the hard heartwood inside, so it springs back into shape, but you can get quite powerful shots with those. These were used a lot in medieval battles. Henry VIII loved it. When you look at the Mary Rose ship that was pulled up, there were loads of war bows up there, so there's lots of great archaeological evidence for archery as well. But then it goes into the archaeological finds of, I mean, arrowheads. There's just so many variations of what's here. Some of them quite savage and horrible, so we can get really gruesome with some of the kids as you're explaining how something like this would work, because once it's in, you can't necessarily pull it out. So we might talk about medieval surgery, of how those things would be extracted. Everything that I talk about, though, I do with the idea that I am talking to a 7 to 11-year-old, so I keep it nice. Gross, but nice. Kids like gross, but not too much detail. But these ones in particular, I started to base these off the ones that were found with the body of a guy called Otzi the Iceman.
So you've made these?
Yes. Yes. So Otzi was a guy found on the Otzel mountain range. He's a frozen ice mummy that's just under 5,500 years old. But the great thing about him, he was found pretty much intact. He was frozen, so many of his pieces of equipment were as well, including his bow, including his quiver, which I've made this one in the same style as his. So you've got a piece of wood down the side that has been grooved out and tied onto a leather bag with a flap to protect the arrowheads. This is in the workshop at the moment because I need to repair it. I need to put a new toggle on there. I'm thinking a piece of deer antler might do it. But also his quiver had a couple of arrows in it that still had heads on, like these here. But he had lots of arrow shafts in there, so it looked like he was in the process of making some new ones. Why? We don't know, because we can't ask him, because he died a long time ago. But one of my favourite things about him is when you analyse the arrows, you can see what or who he had been hunting. But also they found an arrowhead in his shoulder. So they believe it was the fact that he was shot in the shoulder. He was in some sort of scrap or fight. Why? Again, we don't know. We've got lots of theories, lots of ideas. He's one of the people in history that I'd love to go back and have a chat with and go, hey, dude, what happened? And just find out the mystery. But it's that sort of look into it and recreating it.
So you're literally making this in the authentic manner that it would have been made back there. Yeah.
And the reason I do that, because I could easily ask someone to make this for me, which I do with some things because I haven't necessarily got the equipment or the skills to be able to make a good quality version of something. But by doing the process and by learning it, it makes it so much easier to talk about. It's my own intrigue into how people lived and how people made these things. So whether it's dressing like a person, cooking like someone from the past, or making equipment, or wearing that armour, or swinging a sword in the same way, or practicing 14th century longsword techniques from old manuscripts, all those kinds of things, that's what helps bring it alive for me, and that's what we try and push on. So by doing these things practically and making these things, shooting them and figuring out how they work and what I'm doing right, just helps me connect with people from the past. So this particular one is known as the York helmet, or the Coppergate helmet. This is not the original, but this is one of the artifacts that I'll take into schools, especially if I'm teaching about the Anglo-Saxons. When we talk about and teach about the Anglo-Saxons, we do quite a bit about the Vikings as well, talking about Viking invasions. But as this was found in York, York was a city that was ruled by Anglo-Saxons and it was ruled by Vikings at different points in history. So I give the children the challenge of seeing to figure out if it was an Anglo-Saxon or a Viking helmet. They look at it, they handle it, they try it on, they get to do all the fun stuff with it in the morning, and then in the afternoon they have a go at translating the runic inscription over the top of the helmet. It's a very simple decoding activity. It's not in original Old English, the activity I give them. It's been translated into modern day English and then written in runes, and they're basically doing a letter per rune translation of what it says in there. The message itself reads, "In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ and the Spirit of God, let us offer up, O share to all saints, Amen." Or that's one of the translations of it. But basically the fact that at this point in England it was the time that the Anglo-Saxons were converting to Christianity, the fact that it's talking about God and Jesus Christ and all saints and Amen, it's a prayer. The name O'Share, which is an Anglo-Saxon name as well, I believe, all those things add together. So it's a bit of sort of investigation for the children rather than just sitting there and telling them, oh, this is an Anglo-Saxon helmet found in York. And we also talk about things like the Lloyd's Bank coprolite, which is a massive fossilised Viking poo. And as soon as you're with 7 and 11-year-olds and you start talking about poo, you get the but you also get the
we want to know more.
For a start, 20 centimetres long, that's an impressive poo, 5 centimetres wide. Wasn't a very healthy person. Lots of evidence of eating bread as part of the diet.
Right.
Lots of evidence of meat because of things like tapeworm and stuff like that in the poo. So not a healthy person
No.
at all, but it gives us some evidence into food,
Yeah.
and then that will help me talk about farming at the time and
Yeah.
sort of bring them into the more mundane, like, oh, we also know they ate this and this and this because of these different reasons, and go from there. But it's the hook that can get us into talking about food. Also on extending when we talk about things like that to the things that we don't have, such as potatoes.
Yeah.
So no McDonald's, no Haribo, no chocolate, no sugary drinks, and appealing to children with all the terrible things that
Maybe we won't
they
go
like
back
to
in
eat.
time to
yeah,
that, yeah.
Anyone want to try the experiment and live like a Viking? You always have one that will put their hand up. At which point I'll say, "Brilliant! Well, let us know in 2 weeks how long you got on with it, and go from there." But yeah, it's getting them to handle, pick up, and try on and wear this kind of stuff. I think is a big part of it. So I'll put in artifact carousels where we, in the morning, spend at least half an hour with each class picking up, wearing helmets, with safety rules, of course, dressing up in historical costume that I've made, handling household items, like even just down to things like grave goods like combs and money and things like that. And also we do take in replica, very key word, replica weapons, and lots of safe handling for that. So they get to hold a 15th century longsword, or they get to hold a Dane axe and pose beautifully for pictures
without massacring each other.
Without massacring each other. And in all the time that we've done it, we've never had a single injury because I'm on it with safety. I understand what children are like. If you don't give them clear, concise instructions, they will do whatever, because that's what I do. But because I'm used to working with children of that age and realise what they need to know, and also knowing that if they're trusted, they will fall in line if they know the rules. And they know there's no messing, they do the right thing, and they always have. So happy with that. So really, when we started setting up, I knew that we needed lots of different activities, something that would move on every half an hour to 40 minutes, so that you'd keep the attention span of the people you were working with. All the young people, all at different academic levels, so I didn't want a heavy reading and writing session because they can do that in school. But we might do some investigation into decoding a rune, or we might do something based on an archaeological item and learn the history of that, or a particular event or a particular person. And I really like storytelling as well, so I wanted that to be part of it. In that sense. So I had all these ideas, and it was just kind of like slotting them in and seeing how it would plan out and work in a day. And the first few were rough and ready, but they all rebooked.
Right.
So the fact that they rebooked, and I'm happy to
Good
say,
sign.
my out of my first 10 schools that I went to, I think I probably still go to 8 of them, and have been for the last 7 years. And it's great because you're going back to old friends in some ways.
So you going by yourself initially? It was just you?
Yeah, just me. And
you turn up in costume, or would you?
Well, when I first started, I felt uncomfortable in my own skin walking in, not knowing what to do, and I always wore a 3-piece suit as a teacher because I had to wear something different to what I did at home. I had to have my teacher uniform effectively, and then my home uniform. So I realised very quickly going in with a 3-piece suit and then getting changed into a Viking outfit was not necessarily practical. So then, hoodies and t-shirts with branded logos and all that kind of stuff came on. But when I'm teaching throughout the day with the children, I'll be dressed in historical costume.
In whatever
The first half an hour, or the first 15 minutes really, I'll tell a story in character as a person from that time period. But I always present after that, how do you know I'm not really 10,000 years old? How do you know I'm not actually a real Viking? How do you know I wasn't really putting an army together about Bosworth? And I think it's really important that children realise that all these time periods we're looking at, very bluntly, those people are dead. They can't come in and tell us about these things. Yes, you can have actors that can do it, but there's no one there that can give you a first-person recount of what happened. However, our focus is looking at the archaeology, how we find the items, how we know about these things. So the research that I've done is so that I can break it down and make it simpler for the children, so that they can learn about different sources like the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles or the excavations at Starkar and all these things, and show them the items and the evidence and give them the result, but without them having to sit down and do the boring bits, in my opinion. I know it's some people's cup of tea, but for me, it's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's breaking it down from there and making it.
Eventually, though, after 300 years, the Vikings take quite a bit of England. Half of England is owned by the Anglo-Saxons. The other half of England is owned by the Vikings. It's called the Danelaw. So as an old man, Edward the Confessor lay there on his deathbed, and he said, "The next person to be the king of the whole of England is going to be..." And then he died, unable to tell everyone who it was. Well, obviously that caused a massive problem, because 5 people all stepped forward. 5 people who all said that they deserved to be the next king of England. We're back to square one.
I finished off our interview by asking Adam, based on his experience, what advice he would give to any young people struggling for career inspiration.
It's difficult because it all depends on the particular interest of that child. However, the only way I got anywhere was by taking some risks and by breaking the norm and by not sticking in jobs that made me sad. And I think as soon as I realised for myself, because of my impulsivity, that I would leave a job far too quickly, because I wouldn't have a backup plan straight away, I would just leave a job. But it's always worthwhile looking, and it's always worthwhile moving on to something, but it's also worthwhile trying something out of your comfort zone, something a bit different, and taking different opportunities. That's what got me here, and doing something that I love, and doing something that is uniquely weird but very me as well. So if someone does have a particular interest, it's a case of, how can I make this something that I can enjoy throughout my life and maybe turn into a career. It's not always possible. It's not always possible, because I think a lot of people would, love to be a star footballer or, an online streamer or something like that. And some people definitely do make it in that business, but it's having that sort of backup of something that you can still enjoy just as much, and something that can go from there, but something that can work. Giving it a go and seeing what you can get. The main thing would be it'll be all right. Don't worry. This might seem like the end of the world now, but give it a couple of years, you'll look back at it and go, and then go from there. It would be reassuring in giving confidence. I think, like I've said previously, when I took on something new in the face of someone else, I was always very good at showing confidence, and then it was behind closed doors. That's when I would question and doubt and find things difficult more than anything. I was very good at masking in front of people and being the person that I was expected to be, or what I thought people expected to be, and then struggling elsewhere internally. So I think it would be trying to support myself in that way. It's something that I'll be honest, still haven't figured out. Still haven't figured out now, and I don't know if I ever will, because that's just who I am. That's where my brain works. But the general speaking to myself would be, it's all right. There'll be people there. There's other people around you. There'll be something new. There'll be someone that will support. There'll be a new person you'll meet. There'll be something interesting around the corner. And it won't get boring.
As the day ended, I managed to get a few closing thoughts from a very hot and dry-throated Adam before he lost his voice completely.
But yeah, quite often that's a typical day. I mean, it was a bonus today that we were close. The school that we were at was, less than half an hour, so that was good. I find in the morning, if I want them to follow instructions, so listening to a story or getting into positions for pieces of drama. We do things like battle reenactments and stuff like that, which are non-contact, obviously, not using weapons. And when we do those, it's basically storytelling, but moving from one place to another, going around. So they have to be able to really good at following the instructions if that's the case. So we start with those in the morning, but then in the afternoon, I know what children are like once they've had their lunch. I was a teacher for long enough. They lose the plot. So I find it's good to have at least one high energy thing, at least one game for them to have a go at. So they've played Nine Men's Morris or Merrill's this afternoon with the teachers. They did archery with myself, which, as I say, high energy, let them burn some energy off, and they've done quite a calming activity with Rick, translating some runes. And then we finished on a story as well, so I very much enjoy working with young people, but when I do, I also like to do what I want to do with them, so I'd rather do something high energy than sitting in a silent room and, getting them to work harder. That's not my style at all, so...
And I suppose the final point I just wanted to make was it's impossible to do this with this amount of energy, with the days that you've got, unless you love it.
Absolutely, and that's what it is. And I do, if I wasn't 100% invested, it wouldn't be a thing. And
does it feel like a job?
Very much so, because I work hard, and I'm quite often exhausted. I can't wait for the 6 weeks holiday. I'm on my last legs now. It's the heat at the moment that's getting me. But I think it's still okay to like your job. It never stops really, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the feeling of seeing people happy as well. So if they're happy, I'm happy. Just tired.